You reached for the yellow crayon without thinking. Every child does. The circle, the lines radiating out, the warm, burning gold. The same drawing made by children on every continent in every century that had crayons to reach for. Nobody taught you the sun was yellow. You just looked up and drew what you saw. The sun is white. Everything else is your atmosphere and your brain working together. That sentence probably feels wrong. Not uncertain, wrong. The wrongness is the point. You have looked at the sun thousands of times. Every single time, the image was already processed before it reached you. The signal was altered, the color was removed and replaced. You were never looking at the sun. You were looking at the result after two separate systems had already finished their work. The correction has been running your entire life. Light contains every color simultaneously. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, all arriving at once. When all those colors arrive in equal amounts, the combined result is white. A white star, that is what the sun is. In open space above any planet's air, the sun is a brilliant white point of light. Every astronaut who has floated above Earth's atmosphere and looked toward it reports the same thing. White, not yellowish white, white. The atmosphere changes that, not by adding anything, by taking something away. Air is full of gas molecules. Those molecules have a specific problem with blue light. Short wavelength light, the blue end of the spectrum, gets knocked sideways by those molecules aggressively, far more than red or yellow light does. Blue light scatters in every direction across the whole sky. That is why the sky is blue. It is not a reflection of the ocean. It is the blue component of sunlight being distributed everywhere except straight at you. By the time direct sunlight reaches your eyes at noon on a clear day, it has already lost a measurable fraction of its blue content. What remains skews toward yellow-white, not because the sun changed, because the atmosphere took something out and sent it sideways. At noon, the sun looks yellow-white. At sunset, it looks deep orange-red. Same star, same light leaving it. Different amount of atmosphere between you and it. At noon, the sun sits nearly overhead. Sunlight travels through roughly 90 kilometers of atmosphere at its most direct angle. At sunset, that same light arrives almost horizontally. It cuts across hundreds of kilometers of dense lower atmosphere. Blue has been scattered away. Green has been scattered away. Only red and orange survive the crossing. The sun that looked yellow-white at noon looks deep crimson at the horizon. At no point in that arc did the sun emit anything different. The color you saw was a function of how much air stood between you and the source. The atmosphere scatters blue light somewhere between 5 and 10 times more efficiently than red. That gap is what turns white into yellow at noon. That same gap, widened by a longer path through denser air, turns yellow into orange at dusk and orange into deep red at the horizon. The color you have seen every day of your life is not the sun's color. It is a ratio between what left the sun and what the air decided to keep. That would be enough to explain the misconception on its own. But the brain adds a second layer, and this is the part that makes the error invisible from the inside. Your visual system does not passively record color the way a camera does. It actively adjusts. All day long, the light shifts in color temperature. The brain tracks that shift. It continuously updates its internal reference point for what counts as white. This process runs automatically. You cannot disable it. You cannot perceive it operating. Its entire job is to make the world look stable even as the light changes constantly. The effect is striking. The sun appears roughly the same color across the whole day, and yet its apparent color moves from orange-pink at sunrise through yellow-white at noon to deep red at the horizon. Your brain is correcting for all of it in real time, flattening the variation into a manageable constant. You are not perceiving the sun's color. You are perceiving your brain's estimate of the sun's color after two automatic corrections have already run, one atmospheric, one neurological. Neither announces itself. Neither can be turned off by concentrating harder. You are not broken. The system is working as designed. That is the problem. Here is where the error locks in permanently. The blue light the atmosphere removes during the day is removed for everyone, everywhere on Earth, every day of recorded human history. No human civilization has ever looked at the sun through anything other than this filter. Not one. The yellow sun is not a cultural choice. It is a cultural artifact of a physical constraint nobody could escape. 22 national flags feature a yellow or gold sun. Not because those societies decided yellow was aesthetically appropriate, because that is what the sun looks like from inside a planetary atmosphere, and they had no reason to suspect an inside even existed. Science should have corrected this. In one sense, it did. Astrophysicists know the sun emits across the full visible spectrum. The physics is settled, but the correction did not reach common knowledge. The reason is a naming decision inside the scientific community that quietly confirmed the mistake for exactly the people most likely to question it. The sun is classified as a G-type main sequence star. The informal name for this classification is yellow dwarf. The name refers to the sun's surface temperature range, not its perceived color, not its actual emitted color. It is a temperature category, nothing more. But it sounds like a color description. It reads like confirmation. Someone who learns astronomy and encounters the term yellow dwarf does not update their belief that the sun is yellow. They receive authoritative scientific language that appears to validate what they already thought. The one population equipped to detect the error receives it as evidence pointing in the wrong direction. The G-type classification sits at the hotter, whiter end of its temperature range. It sits closer to the boundary with hotter F-type stars than to the cool K-type stars below it. Yellow dwarf was already an approximation when it was coined. For the sun specifically, it is a poor one. But it stuck. It became the standard term. It appeared in textbooks, encyclopedias, and educational materials for decades. Every student who learned what type of star the sun is also learned, by implication, that yellow is its color. The error did not need to be stated explicitly. It was built into the vocabulary. The public received yellow dwarf and stored it alongside the sky is blue and the sun is yellow. Three facts that feel consistent. Three facts that reinforce each other. All three are downstream of the same atmospheric filter. The filter did not just affect what people saw. It shaped what people were told. It organized itself into the language of science. The misconception became self-reproducing. After that point, the loop closes. Neither personal observation nor scientific reading from within Earth's atmosphere can break it. The misconception is not just perceptual. It is not just cultural. It has been encoded into the classification system designed to describe stars accurately. That encoding makes the error invisible from any direction a normal person would think to look. The correction mechanism became part of the error itself. The only exit is to leave the atmosphere entirely. There is a personal dimension to this that only becomes visible when you trace it all the way through. The yellow crayon you reached for as a child was not ignorance, it was accurate perception. You drew what you saw. What you saw was real. It was genuinely the color of light arriving at your eyes. But it was not true. It was a property of the air between you and the star, not a property of the star itself. You have been drawing the atmosphere your entire life and calling it the sun. Every drawing was a perfect record of the filter. None of them recorded what was behind it. In 1990, NASA turned the camera of the Voyager 1 spacecraft around. The probe had traveled roughly 6 billion kilometers from Earth. That distance is more than 40 times the Earth-Sun distance, far enough that the entire inner solar system fits inside a small patch of sky. At the request of astronomer Carl Sagan, the camera captured that patch. In the resulting photograph known as the pale blue dot image, the sun appears as a bright white point of light. No yellow, no gold, white. Sagan used the image to argue that perspective, the physical position of the observer, is the most fundamental scientific instrument, not the telescope, not the equation, where you are standing. The image required no special filter, no exotic sensor. Voyager 1 simply stood above every planetary atmosphere in the solar system and pointed at the source. Every color photograph of the sun taken by spacecraft above the atmosphere shows the same white output. Solar telescopes in orbit are engineered around the sun's white light spectrum, not a yellow one. The color archived in orbit and the color archived in every human painting across 10,000 years of civilization are not the same color. One is a record of the source. The other is a record of the filter. The sun's surface temperature sits at roughly 5,500 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, objects emit light across the entire visible spectrum in proportions close enough to equal that the combined output appears white. The sun is not especially hot for a star. Stars hotter than it appear blue-white in the night sky, stars cooler than it appear orange or red. Those colors you can trust. When you look at any star in the night sky, you are looking at it through Earth's atmosphere. But the path length through that atmosphere is short. The star is distant and dim. The differential scattering that produces the yellow sun during the day does not produce a comparable color shift on distant starlight at night. The night sky shows you real stellar colors, each one a temperature reading from a different sun. The daytime sky shows you a version of your own sun that has been processed, cropped, and color-corrected before delivery. The obvious counter-argument is that a proper solar filter, the kind used for eclipse viewing, still shows a slightly yellowish sun. That observation is accurate. The conclusion drawn from it is not. A solar filter is not designed to reproduce the sun's actual color. It is designed to reduce intensity enough to prevent eye damage. It reduces the number of photons arriving at the eye. It does not remove the atmosphere standing between you and the sun. By the time sunlight hits your filter, it has already passed through hundreds of kilometers of gas that stripped the blue component. The filter absorbed brightness. The atmosphere already handled color. What you see through the filter is the same edited copy. Quieter, not truer. Remove 99% of the brightness and the color ratio of what remains is identical to the color ratio of unfiltered sunlight at that angle. The filter is a volume control. It does not touch the equalizer. The atmosphere set the equalizer before the light ever reached your hand. The filter confirms you are still inside the atmosphere. It does not confirm the sun is yellow. There is one more version of this counter-argument that is harder to dismiss. The sun does peak its emission output in the green part of the visible spectrum. Green is not yellow and not white, but it is also not the white the physicist claims. Shouldn't a star peaking in green look green? No. And this is where the logic closes in the most satisfying way. The sun emits across the entire visible range simultaneously. It does not emit only green because its peak is green. A speaker with a slightly boosted mid-range does not produce only mid-range sound. It produces all frequencies with the mid-range marginally louder. The combined output is still all frequencies. When all visible wavelengths arrive at the eye in the proportions the sun produces them, the eye does not see the wavelength at the peak. It sees the mixture. The mixture is white. The peak emission in green is why astronomers know the surface temperature with precision. It is not what you see when you look at the source. You see the mixture, which is white, which the atmosphere then edits into yellow. The argument from peak emission is the last refuge of the misconception. It sounds technical. It sounds like it should matter. It does not change what arrives at your eye or what color the eye reports. The sun is still white. The atmosphere is still the filter. The crayon you reached for as a child was still the wrong one, but the right one was never available where you were standing. Some people push the argument further. At noon on a clear day, the sun has already lost enough blue to shift its perceived color from white toward yellow. At sunset, passing through 40 times as much atmosphere, it shifts all the way to deep red. Yellow at noon is not a minor rounding error on white. It is the same scattering process, operating at its weakest angle. The process is not finished with you at noon. It is just getting started. The fact that the distortion is moderate at noon does not mean the distortion is small. It means the geometry happens to be favorable. Move the sun toward the horizon, and the same physics that produced yellow at noon produces crimson before it sets. The moment the sun's color is most dramatic is the moment farthest from the truth. Deep crimson at a full sunset, burning orange at dusk. It is the most photographed version of the sun. It appears on travel book covers and in the name Golden Hour. It is called beautiful. What it actually is, the sun at maximum atmospheric distortion, the filter performing at full strength. Every blue and green photon that could have survived the crossing was scattered away long before the light reached you. What you call the most beautiful color the sun produces is the most thorough lie it tells. The closer the sun comes to its actual whiteness, the more people look away. Overhead at noon, minimal atmosphere in the path, and the response is sunglasses, squinting, avoidance. The truest version of the sun is the one nobody wants to look at. The most beautiful version is the one farthest from the source. Perception is not observation, it is a reconstruction. Your brain delivers a processed version of a filtered, corrected, adapted signal. It arrives without labels, without a warning that alteration occurred, without any visible seam between the source and what finally registers as color. This is not a flaw in human perception. It is how perception was built to work. The filtering is the feature, not the bug. But the feature costs something. It costs the ability to know from inside the system when the system is running. You cannot feel chromatic adaptation correcting your white point. You cannot feel the atmosphere removing your blue. You receive the output and experience it as raw reality. The sun's color is not an exotic edge case. It is the most universal demonstration available that what the brain presents as direct experience is always, already, an edited copy. Every person alive is looking through the same glass. None of them installed it. None of them can take it off. The James Webb Space Telescope sits 1.5 million kilometers from Earth at a gravitational balance point. It is above every planetary atmosphere, above every filter. It images stellar nurseries at their actual spectral output, unedited, exactly as the physics produces it. It will map the atmospheres of distant planets and estimate whether liquid water exists beneath their clouds. It will not recalibrate what the human eye sees from the surface. It will not restore a single perception that the atmosphere already took. Every observation Webb makes about other stars will be communicated to people who have never once seen their own star's actual color. They never will. Not standing where they are standing. Webb will see the universe without the glass. The glass is still your problem.